A Monday evening when it must be time for Zen and the art of. And tonight, I'm especially excited to be talking to Gidi Grinstein, and I am always very excited to see my co-host in this adventure, Deborah Briggs, and I'm the Associate Dean for Cultural and Community Engagement at FIU's College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts. And I am here on Miami Beach, very close spatially to the Betsy Hotel, and we are a collider for people and ideas in arts, design, technology, and the sciences. And the Betsy Hotel, in many ways, is a similarly spirited space for collisions and new ideas. And so, Deborah, as always, it's great to see you here. How are you doing tonight?
Good, thanks. I'm delighted to be here as well, John. And for any of you who don't know, the Betsy Hotel and MBUS are very similar. And I'm proud to be here tonight representing the Betsy, but also proud to say that I'm on the board of MBUS. It's the only nonprofit board I'm actually on. And I'm very excited because tonight we're going to be focused on meeting somebody very unique and visionary that is engaged in working with MBUS on a very exciting project, which I learned first about as a member of the board of MBUS. So I'll leave that for a moment. I'd like to do sort of what I always do, which is to mention our community partners. The Betsy Hotel is a community-driven hotel on Ocean Drive. I don't know if many of you know who are on the call, but we have a visiting artist room. We've had over 1,000 thought leaders visit that room, and a number of them have been shared with MBUS. We do that kind of work with MBUS by working with the City of Miami Beach, the Miami-Dade County, the Betsy Community Fund at the Miami Foundation, which is a fund that is a subsidiary of the Betsy Hotel, and the Plutzik Goldwasser Foundation, which is my family's philanthropic foundation. Since John and I started this exercise, this community on around the 26th of March, I think, we've had about 1,500 households join us. And we're proud of that because these are sort of lonely times, physically lonely times and intellectually lonely times for all of us, even those of us engaged at working still. I wanted to remind you all, it's not only about the audience that joins us here tonight, it's about sharing. If you get excited about what we're talking about tonight, share it with friends, send them to our Facebook, to Tikkun Olam Makers Facebook page, or come to the Betsy Hotel or FIU's Facebook page and share a video of tonight's conversation. So before moving forward, I just want to give a special shout out to the Israeli consulate in Miami Beach and to our friends there who are so supportive of all we do and who share our excitement tonight at welcoming Gidi Grinstein and Tikkun Olam Makers to talk about everything they're doing to make the world a better place. So thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to pass the torch back to John to get started with the conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Great, thank you, Deborah. So Gidi, welcome. I understand that you're in Denver right now, so it's a little earlier in the day for you, but I'm delighted that you're able to spend some time with us. I want to frame this conversation by telling people a little bit about you, and then we'll dive right into how special you are. And first of all, I want to just admit I'm a little nervous because you are very, very good at what you do, and you're an incredible kind of inspiration for me. So it's like it's just really an honor to be here with you. But I also want to give a big shout out to Carlos Becerra of FIU DC and to Ariel Roman Harris, who were really instrumental in kind of bringing us together. We had kind of been together or almost connecting. Our stars had nearly collided a couple of times. One was very early on when somebody recommended that we try to reach out to each other. Another was when one of our students, before we really knew what the Tom Global World was, had entered and won a prize in San Francisco in one of the very early competitions. So I'll just mention to folks who may not be familiar with you that you're an Israeli entrepreneur and visionary. You're the founder of the Reut Group, which is an Israeli think tank specializing in innovation. You've helped to found Tikkun Olam Makers, which is going to be a lot of what we talk about today. And FIU is part of Tikkun. We are partners in this. We have the Tom FIU community here at the Miami Beach Urban Studios, as Deborah mentioned. In 2017, Forbes named Tom one of the top 15 tech companies to watch in the following year. And you're also an author of a book called Flexigidity, The Secret of Jewish Adaptability and the Challenge and Opportunity Facing Israel. So since our focus today is really about Zen and kind of Zen and the art of making, we also have making music, writing poetry, and building community. Any of those, I'm sure you could talk to us for an hour about, but we will start with the kind of Zen and how we find our center and find our place in this world. And to start with that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your own adventure in life and your own personal mission.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me and allowing me the opportunity to be with you. This is really a phenomenal forum. And the Betsy Hotel is very famous. When I sent this invitation to some of my friends in Miami, everybody got back to me and said, Betsy Hotel, oh my God, you guys are there. That's fantastic. And the relationship with Florida International University, and specifically, John, with your team, has been phenomenal. And we're so proud of it. I'm going to get back to that if I may later, about the potential of this relationship moving forward. Hopefully we could spend a couple of minutes about that a little later. My journey in the public space actually began with a formative event for every Israeli and many Jews around the world, which was the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin in 1995. Shortly thereafter, and I'm making a long story short, a group of 60 Israelis across the entire political and social and religious spectrum, Jews, Christian, Muslims, all types of industrialists, social activists, older, younger people, we all came together in order to work on one task, which is to imagine a society that is resilient and prosperous 30 years into the future. And the idea was that when you think that far into the future, you transcend all prevailing and existing political and ideological differences, because everybody wants security and prosperity for their children. I happen to have been the youngest participant in this process, but I learned a lot. It was actually a formative moment for me. And I learned, a lot of what I learned in that process came from a person that is a veteran of another polarized society, which is South Africa. His name is Andre Zyman. And if there is one thing that I learned from him, was the importance, the incredible importance of being very deliberate about having an inclusive society, a society where prosperity trickles down to everybody. We're brought up in democratic market economies. We're brought up to think that inclusiveness happens naturally, as if it is a force of nature, it's gravity. But really, for society to be inclusive, we all have to be deliberate about it. We have to think strategically and creatively about how to make society work for all its members, across all demographies, and across the entire geography of the country. And that was the formative takeaway from that process. Fast forward, I got a fellowship, a Wexner fellowship, to go to the Kennedy School of Government. And I decided to spend my year there, which was from 2001 to 2002, on figuring out how we can make, basically leap Israel into becoming one of the most prosperous countries in the world, which is also economically and socially inclusive. I spent a whole year researching that process, which then led me to conclude that when I go back to Israel, I should create an institution that will focus about creating long-term strategies and innovative models for dealing with the biggest challenges that face our society, which is how Re'ut came into being. Fast forward to that, Re'ut brought into being Tom, which is what we're here to discuss today.
But there's a really interesting moment when you first arrived at the Kennedy School and you were given your first assignment.
Right.
Could you describe what happened then?
It was really By the way, we're 5 minutes in and we're already talking about two formative moments in my life. So,
Well, this is all it is.
all right,
This is
yes,
our zen.
yes. So first day in the Kennedy School, everybody's tasked. At least our class was tasked, 200 people, to imagine or to envision what we would want the eulogy that would be said by our children about us when all is said and done. And this was a very simple exercise to basically push us to try to think about what is our mission in life. And my conclusion was that my mission is to try to move the needle for my country and my people, and wherever possible to make a significant and distinct contribution to humanity. I wrote it on a piece of paper, and since then, this is the mission of my professional life.
Wow. No, it seems like such a daunting task because there's so many ways in which your life can go. And before you went to the Kennedy School, what you were educated in Israel, and what were your direction, the studies? I'm asking because I'm a university professor, so I'm interested in.
So I studied economics and law in Tel Aviv University. I'm sure a lot of the people that you host here would probably have a record of saying that they were the top of their class. I represent the other end of the spectrum. I was probably the bottom of my class, at least in law school. But the reason that I was not so focused on schooling is that this was the 1990s in Israel, late 1990s. And it was a period of dramatic changes for Israeli society, primarily because of what was then still called the peace process. Mm-hmm. And I saw that history was being made almost on a daily or weekly basis. And I wanted to be part of that. I always said to my friends, I want to be able to grab history by the tail. So I started working on the peace process and joined a group that actually was one of the pioneers of figuring out Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian relations, primarily economic relations. But then after a couple of years, I started focusing also on political issues, on issues of basically putting together groups of experts. This is all non-governmental work. Everything is happening outside of government. But basically, we put together teams of experts that would think about how to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we did it in a very methodic and professional way. We had a team of experts looking at security issues, on the issue of Jerusalem, on refugees, on economic relations, on how to bring into being a Palestinian state without compromising Israeli interests. Everybody says two-state solution. But the two-state solution requires bringing into being a state that will be living in peace alongside Israel. This is an extremely complicated exercise. So we had all these groups, and I was basically privileged. I was in the right place at the right time to be coordinating this entire effort. And then when Prime Minister Ehud Barak was elected, he needed a team to run the negotiations. And every negotiation team needs a secretary, needs someone that will be working with and coordinating this entire effort. And that's how I found myself moving from the non-government world to the government world, which is basically joining the office of the Prime Minister, and then later the Bureau of the Prime Minister in Israel, which is basically the Israeli version of the West Wing. So that was happening in parallel to my schooling. That was my real school.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that led you directly to the Camp David Summit, and since that was kind of about peace, and we're looking at ways to think about peace in their conversation, and equity and all these other things. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that moment.
So, yes, this was a time or a period of trying to make peace. But it was also a very aggressive period within us and the Palestinians, because we had some national interests on our side, and they had interests on their side that were clashing. And the government of Israel at the time had multiple additional issues it needed to take care of. Some of you may remember we were trying to make peace. The Prime Minister was trying to reach a peace agreement with President Assad, the father, before he passed away. And then once that didn't work out, we were basically in a stalemate. We were stuck in Lebanon. and then the prime minister decided to withdraw the Israeli military forces unilaterally from Lebanon. All of that is happening within a span of 10 months. And then there is the Palestinian issue. So you can only imagine the pressure and the intensity and the complexity around the prime minister in the prime minister's office. But ultimately, after 10 months of dramatic political moves with Syria and in Lebanon, comes the turn of the Palestinians, which is roughly between as of May 2000. And as was mentioned earlier, I was the secretary of the Israeli delegation. So by the time we get to these negotiations, we have a lot of conflicting interests with the Palestinians. So it was not Zen at all. But, and this is the big but, we spent hundreds and hundreds of hours with our Palestinian interlocutors. You know, when we negotiated, it was a different team. Negotiated with the Syrians, they never broke bread with us. They never had a glass of water with us. It was so formal, it was so distant and cold. But with the Palestinians, we were friendly. We ate together. We drank together. Water, not sometimes alcohol. I don't drink alcohol. Some of them don't. But what I want to say is, in between these negotiation sessions, we spent some personal time. We got to know their personal stories and their families. And this is where there is a Zen-related insight that I could share here. And that is, when you come to these negotiations, and especially our side, we are very prepared. We did our homework. We knew our positions. We were lawyered up. We knew the facts. We knew the arguments. We had every aspect of international law that could back our positions. We had it down. But then over time, after you put your position forward and you argue, but when you listen to the other side, especially in these side conversations, you begin to see their narrative. It doesn't necessarily mean you agree with them, but you see their perspective. And I'll give two examples. The first example is the issue of Palestinian refugees. When we came into the negotiation, we, meaning the Israelis, we thought that this is just an issue the Palestinians were using to create leverage on us. But over time, when we heard their personal stories, the stories of their parents and the grandparents, we started to understand how painful it was for them. This doesn't mean that we accept their positions, but we understand their story. And a few months ago, I was on a Zoom call with my interlocutor, which means the secretary and the lawyer of the Palestinian team, on a Zoom call just like that, the one we're having tonight. And in answering one of the questions, he said that when the Palestinian team came in, they thought that what the Israelis were saying about Jerusalem was just a power play to push them out of Jerusalem. And over time, after hundreds and hundreds of hours of spending time with us, he began to understand for the first time in his life how central Jerusalem was for us. That this was not just an attempt to leverage, to push them out. That we had authentic, deep association, not just with Jerusalem in general, with Temple Mount, with the place where their mosques are. It's also a place that is holy to us. And the way he shared it with everybody in such an authentic and credible and personal way really resonated with me, because I remember how the room exploded when the issue of Jerusalem came up. I'm talking about negotiations that turned into screaming matches. Okay? And years later, the person on the other side tells you, you know what? Took me a while, but now I understand your connection to that place. And this is a process that happens even when you sit with people that are adversaries. But over time, we also become partners in the efforts of peacemaking.
No, I totally. I mean, I love the fact that you mentioned, breaking bread, and it's something that Deborah and I have talked a lot about, how that kind of promotes a sense of trust, but it's intangible. It's not a mathematical formula. It's nothing. And the way you're describing empathy and building trust among these two adversarial teams, and kind of how empathy can sneak up on you when you're not expecting it. I think it's a really interesting.
I'll tell you another little anecdote about that.
Go ahead.
The first time we discussed Jerusalem, very quickly, we presented our positions on Jerusalem and on the association to the old city of Jerusalem and Temple Mount, and they really rejected these notions. They basically said, we don't accept that you guys have a special affiliation with Temple Mount, with the place where the mosques are. And very quickly, it became a very aggressive meeting. Very, very aggressive. But right there, one of the top negotiators on the Palestinian side, got word that I believe it was his son that passed away. And the dynamics changed immediately. We basically set it became like a mourning. And we participated in his loss. Before he left, we were in Washington, he left Washington to be with his family. And the change that happened, basically, I would say almost within minutes, from a very political, ideological clash to a very personal human moment where someone loses a member of their family. That was so dramatic. And so, as you say, human.
Wow, that sounds incredibly intense. And a lot of this, really, it reminds me of the formulation of a new community. It's like if your negotiating teams had to spend more time together for some reason, there would have been even more opportunities to build a community together. And that kind of brings me back to the topic that we started on here, which was Tikkun Olam makers, but also kind of we had talked before about why today is actually a very special day. And it connects us kind of in this kind of cosmic way to our topic tonight. And I didn't know if you wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, and you pointed it out, so I'm not gonna steal the show here. Why don't you talk about why
it's actually, I think both of us loved it. And it's a fact that today, July 20, 1969, is when the first man walked on the moon. And this was not obviously a one-person effort. This was an effort of a whole decade. President Kennedy in 1961 envisioned this bold goal of putting American astronauts on the moon and bringing them back safely to Earth. When President Kennedy articulates this mission, the engineering is not there, some of the math is not there, the science is not figured out, but within a decade of a tremendous concerted effort, that goal was achieved. And one of the greatest, by the way, what was required in order to do that are inventions that serve us until today. Even vacuum cleaner, the water purification, so many of the things we take for granted were invented in order to put a man on the moon. But the one thing that President Kennedy inherited the world is what we call moonshot thinking, which is basically an approach that strives for tremendous achievements that are 10 times better than anything we know. And paradoxically, a lot of people would say that moonshot thinking is easier, that 10 times better is easier than 10% better. Because 10%, when you want to improve by 10%, you're actually working within the existing system. When you want to improve 10 times better, you have to reinvent the system. And that is sometimes easier. So going back to TOM, the origin of TOM stands for Tikkun Olam makers. As you all know, or many of you may know, Tikkun Olam is an ancient Jewish concept that requires every person to do whatever they can to make the world a better place. And 6-7 years ago, before TOM was launched, a team within the Re'ud group, my team, we came together and we asked ourselves, what should be the place of the state of Israel and the Jewish people in humanity in the 21st century? And we understood that in order to play a significant role in humanity, we have to mobilize around some of the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest challenges that is facing the world. We wanted to make a contribution. We envisioned our country, our society, our people, making a contribution to the world that is 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger than our relative size. Okay, so the question is, how do you go for that? How do you, help hundreds of millions of people? We also understood that this is a new period in the history of the Jewish people. I'm talking about last 30 years and moving into the future. Because For centuries and centuries, the contribution of the Jewish people to humanity was qualitative through values and ideas and institutions and laws and so on. But in the last 20, 30 years, we can actually improve the world quantitatively by improving the lives of hundreds of millions of people. And the secret sauce for doing that is by having Israel as this amazing playground for new ideas that can help humanity, with the World Wide Web of Jewish communities that are like distribution network that is second to none, together with the power of technology and with the values of Tikkun Olam. So our idea was to start an Israeli humanitarian project, which is also global. It may have been initiated from Israel or by Israelis, but it's actually to serve every human being around the world. And that was the origin of the project, basically helping 250 million people, moonshot project, driving dramatic innovation in design and technology around the needs of people at the bottom of the pyramid, people living with disabilities, people who are experiencing poverty, elderly people, homeless people, wounded vets, all of these communities that are structurally disenfranchised, which means the markets cannot answer their needs, and oftentimes government cannot answer the needs. So that sweet spot between market failure and government failure is where we wanted to be. And that's the origin of Tom.
But okay, no, that's a great description. From my perspective, there could be so many angles into that sweet spot. It could be addressed by so many different, it could be food security, it could be all these different health, all these different things. How did you choose the maker space as kind of the place that would have this idea kind of come to fruition and blossom?
So personally, my son, since he was 14, he was speaking about 3D printing and the maker revolution. And we would speak about that almost every Friday night and Shabbat. And over time, when your kid tells you, I would say that probably happened to many of us, when you hear something enough times from your kid, you better listen. So I started listening. And I started seeing the tremendous potential of this revolution. But that obviously was not enough, because we needed to tie the technology to social problems. And I want to explain through an example of what we're talking about. About a year and a half ago, an Israeli wounded vet comes and meets the Tom team in Israel, and he has lost his left arm. And the Israeli VA, Veterans Administration, gives him this bionic arm that cost a fortune. But this arm is not useful. The prosthesis is not useful, because if he wants to paint, if he wants to cook, if he wants to sit to a dinner table holding a fork and a knife, that arm, that prosthesis is not, he can't do these things. So he wanted to create something that is customizable, multi-purpose, affordable, because this is no longer covered by insurance, and lightweight. Okay, we called it the PJ prosthesis. And indeed, a Tom team in Israel of engineers, programmers, and product designers designed for him a prosthesis that cost $60 to make, weighs a pound, allows him to paint, to cook, and to sit at the dinner table, so multi-purpose and customizable. Okay, phase one. Months later, a Tom community in Singapore is dealing with the need of a person by the name of Boon. Boon is a man in his late 40s who ate the wrong kind of sushi, what was affected by flesh-eating bacteria, lost his 4 limbs. He has no hands and no legs. He now wants to be able to go to the toilet independently without assistance. So the Tom team in Singapore, because everything created in Tom is public domain intellectual property, it's basically open source. So everything was created in Israel for the wounded vet, his name is Noam, was now available online. The Singapore community downloads, the Tom community in Singapore downloads the design of that prosthesis and improves it for Boon, so that he now can go to the toilet. And they create a few adjustments. Again, 3 months later, we're dealing with the needs of a girl who's 15 years old. She doesn't have an arm. She wants to play the violin. Now, customized prostheses for playing the violin exist around the world, but they're very expensive. So the Tom team, another Tom team in Israel of a university, a school of design, Shenkar, takes this design that was initially created in Israel, improved in Singapore, and they adapt it to create a prosthesis that allows this girl to play the violin. And again, costing less than $100, weighing a pound, customizable, multi-purpose. And this is the power of this idea. This is one example on our website today. If you go to tomglobal.org, you'll see 500 products in different phases of development, which basically means that when we create the platform and we create the process that allows people to innovate, you can have a tremendous amount of innovation focused on creating highly affordable solutions for people who are at the bottom of the economic ladder. And that's basically what we're doing. And this is, I have to say, with you, it's been an amazing experience, the way we're tapping into what Florida International University has created in Miami Beach, your team, the amazing place that you guys have built. And that partnership is very valuable. By the way, I saw on the call the head of our Tom community also in Australia, in Melbourne, Debbie Dadon. And we have 67 locations around the world that have joined the movement in 24 countries. But this is really the tip of the iceberg and the tip of our plans. We have a big vision for the world now. And actually, paradoxically, as COVID-19, as difficult as the situation is in COVID-19, it's also a big opportunity for us.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the COVID-19 as well. But first, I've never really heard you, I've heard you articulate that form of the vision as it's like the full iceberg, not the tip, but the full iceberg. But from your perspective, what does that landscape look like when 250 million people are impacted by this idea? What kind of changes would you imagine our world we would experience on a daily basis with that?
So because we're building a platform, we don't know where it's going to go. We are unleashing dramatic forces of doing good. The basic insight of our project is that every community in every society, Miami Beach, Florida, the United States of America, Israel, every country, at the same time, in any given moment, there is abundance and scarcity. So what is the abundance? It is abundance of talent, abundance of resources. It is 3D printers that are underused. Okay? It is goodwill that exists everywhere. What is the scarcity? These are people who are living with acute needs that will not get an affordable market or government solution. So what we're creating in Tom is basically a platform that allows the abundance to flow to the scarcity. But we also know that even people with tremendous skill and all the goodwill in the world, in order to do good, they need a few basic conditions to be met. In other words, we have to lower the barrier of participation to allow people to be able to deploy their skills, to deploy their values, to deploy their resources in order to help society. And what are these barriers that we're lowering? First of all, we are increasingly creating a very effective method that allows people to plug and play. So if you're an engineer, if you're a programmer, if you're a product designer, we want to make it very easy for you to step up wherever you are, find a project to work on, find a team to work with, do whatever you can, deploy, deposit the progress that you have made so that someone else will take that, whatever you have done, will take it forward until there is a product that could be delivered to the users. The second is we're creating a web platform. I mentioned it earlier, tomglobal.org, which houses all communities around the world and houses all products around the world. And the third thing is we're creating this worldwide web of communities. So let's just focus on the United States because the world is very big and it may sound too grandiose. The United States, in our vision, there are 50 states in the United States. There'll be Tom presence in those 50 states. Just in the state of Florida, in every university where there's engineering and design program, there can and there should be a Tom community. In every city in Florida that is of even basic size, 5,000 people, 10,000 people, up to millions, there should be Tom presence. Okay, corporates that have engineering or design facilities could choose to dedicate small fraction of their talent to, or their facilities to doing these things. We're talking about rehabilitation centers today that have all these solutions that they're creating locally for their people. All these solutions could be digitized and served. So in our vision, there'll be thousands of available solutions for free online that people can download to their smartphones. Solutions for people living with disabilities, elderly, poor, wounded vets, homelessness, and so on. Thousands of these solutions available. When you download them, all these, it's called maker spaces or 3D printers around the world. All these 3D printers are local manufacturing facilities. So that means that someone in Miami Beach can download a solution, this prosthesis that we mentioned, come to you, John, and say, John, can you please print this solution for me? Okay, and suddenly the person in Miami Beach has access to a prosthesis that hopefully will cost less than $100, will weigh a pound, will be multi-purpose, customizable. It was created in Israel, improved in Singapore, and who knows in many other places. And it is delivered to them in Miami Beach. And that should happen. That process should happen millions of times around the world. This is our vision.
No, it's so inspirational. I never ceases to thrill me to hear you talk about it and what it can be. And it's exactly why we're so excited about joining. And you met President Rosenberg, and we were all extremely excited about this. I think also that the number of ancillary opportunities that are arriving with that person who now can play the violin, would be music lessons, or would be some other, I mean, there could be a whole other kind of world forming around each one of these implementations of the maker of the product, of this new product. So, but we're kind of running out of time, as much as I would love for this to kind of keep going. But I wanted to, since we're a university, I wanted to know if you had, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, a global pandemic, I was wondering whether you had any advice for students who right now might be, young like you were. Maybe they're wondering what like you were when you had all these exceptional experiences. I should have ended that sentence a little better. But what would you tell a student to kind of inspire them, or to, in a challenging time like this, and you've obviously seen many challenging times, about their own futures?
So let me just, first of all, if I may zoom out before we zoom in on the experience of the student. So this is a dramatic crisis. It's a catastrophe that we are not even able to begin to imagine. I'm now in Denver. It's Monday morning, the beginning of the work week. Downtown Denver, you walk around, it looks like Sunday. And that's true in many other places. So the economic implications are catastrophic. So against this backdrop, it's hard to speak about the opportunity. But here is the opportunity that we see in our TOM team and TOM communities around the world. We see an abundance of amazing talent that is now forced to be available. And we're seeing tremendous needs in our societies and in our communities. And we believe that this is the tremendous opportunity that is emerging. All these problems on one side and all this talent on the other side. So I don't even want to call it advice, because people are in dire situations. But perhaps the insight I could share is the following. This is the opportunity to do extraordinary things. For all these engineers out there, the programmers, the product designers, the community organizers, the occupational therapists, all of you out there, this is a forced break from the path that you may have planned yourself, but this is your opportunity to do something extraordinary. And if what we are doing, if we succeed in what we're trying to do, then we will create a platform that will allow thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people to deploy their skills to help solve human problems all over the world. And together, this crisis of COVID-19 may become the starting point of a glorious moment in human society, where we come together globally to create a systemic solution for a systemic problem, where every locality, you guys in Miami Beach, you are contributors to the global repository of solutions, and you can benefit from everything and anything that has been created from Australia to Argentina, from Canada to Kazakhstan. And that's how we come together across religious lines, across political lines, across gender lines. Any possible divider, we bridge it through global collaboration in the service of our communities.
That's beautifully put. And I had somebody on the chat was asking about the face shields that we created, and it was a kind of interesting, kind of specific moment, kind of a specific to the general idea that you were describing, because we were just on a call with Melbourne, with Tel Aviv, with New York, with London about PPE, about the personal protective equipment. And we were looking at the face shield, and then less than a week later, we were asked out of the blue to see if we could provide in our printing lab face shield. And of course, we turned to the example that Tom had on there. You had a few examples of a few things. There were ventilator splitters and a couple of other things that were being investigated then. And so it happened to coincide with what our medical advisors were also looking at. We were all looking at the same thing, and it came together that we modified what you had. We were able to provide it immediately to Baptist Hospital, and then to firefighters, thousands to firefighters in Miami-Dade County, then to small businesses, minority-owned small businesses, particularly Black-owned barbershops and hair salons. And the list goes on. And now we're today we had a request for our athletics department at FIU you don't know to have face shields as part of their training. So I'm just putting a specific to the idea that you kind of introduced. Right. And I hope that people understand that value it comes back to the person, to the individual, that it's this incredible connection between, and you've said it so well throughout this talk, about the dance between the kind of political and global and huge ideas, the moonshot itself, and the personal, and the death of the negotiator's child, or the personal, the breaking bread together. And kind of, if you can hold those two things in your mind, as you somehow are incredibly capable of doing, even if you were a bad student in law, then you have the advantage of being able to, I think, act both and think both strategically and empathetically. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. And
can I just say one more thing?
Yeah, I know. I didn't mean to go out and lecture you about that.
No. I just want to say that Tom communities around the world have delivered more than 100,000 units of PPE. Tom community in Mexico delivered thousands of what is called Y splitters. Y splitters, we may not be allowed to use them in Israel or in the United States, but they basically, without getting into too many details, they basically double the capacity of respirators. Okay, so instead of serving one person, serving two people. This is in Mexico. We are collaborating in creating and distributing these solutions because everything is open source. Nobody owns the IP. So you were able to download designs that were created somewhere else, and whatever you created now serves other people. And this is the beauty of the project. We are like a platform for global collaboration around human problems. I know it sounds very sort of 30,000 feet big picture, but this is what we are. And I also want to say that from my perspective, because you guys are, and I see all Tom communities, and you are really one of the exceptional Tom communities around the world, I believe that you guys and what you do could be a beacon across Florida. What you guys are doing can offer help and be relevant to all the people of Florida and well beyond Florida. Your activity local could actually be global. And that's the beauty of it, because you guys are, what you have done is very special. It's exceptional in the creativity, in the level of professionalism. And now it's available far beyond the geography, the natural geography of your university.
Well, thank you very much. Those are very kind words. And I am so proud to be part of a team here at FIU and this university that's a partner with you and your team. And I want to thank you very much for spending this time with us. It's been a real privilege, and I hope that we get more time together in person sometime soon.
We
Maybe
will.
breaking bread at the
Tomorrow
Betsy.
I'm coming to Miami, by the way.
Okay, all right, great. If you have a mask, you can come in the lab.
Yeah. We're quarantining in Miami.
Okay, all right. Quarantine in Miami sounds like a good idea. Well, Deborah, did you have any last words that you want to say?
Yes, of course, I want to invite you to eat your dinner in the atrium at the Betsy. It's very wide open and no germs there. But anyway, thank you so much, Gidi. It was really motivating to hear you speak tonight. I wanted to remind everyone to join us next week, next Monday night at 7, to hear from one of FIU's outstanding faculty members and another visionary in our local community, Nick Jelpe, who's an incredible architect. And so that's 7 p.m. next Monday night. And look for your invitation in your inbox. And if you don't get it for some reason, please reach out to me or to John, and we'll make sure you have your Zoom information. So I'll hand it back to you, John, and say thank you again to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I've just allowed you to unmute yourself. Zoom kind of changed these rules. So if you want to say thank you to Gidi or clap for him or whatever, join me. Thank you.
We can do everything.
Wonderful.
Clap, thanks. Asalto.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the
Fantastic.
time.
Thank you.